10X Branding and Marketing, it's a very unique program. And in this program, you will learn about how to build your corporate culture to achieve large and life impact. You will learn how to build your corporate culture to withstand domestic and foreign threats. And you will learn how to build your corporate culture to enhance your brand conversion factors, the business conversion factors. And this is just a tip of the iceberg. There's so much more information for you to learn in this program as we go deeper into this program itself. So I want to take this time to welcome you to the 10X Wealth Leadership Bootcamp. And today we will be looking at a number of important issues to help you to better understand how to build out your brand. Now, there's a number of important questions that I want you to ask yourself. I want you to, just ask yourself, what in your mind is a definition of a brand? What in your mind is a definition of a brand? What is a value proposition? We'll look at these issues today. What is a value proposition? And third, I want you to define a brand without a value proposition. What is a brand? Ask yourself those questions. What is a brand without the value proposition? And what I will do today, I will take a very brief look at the Nike and the Michael Jordan endorsement of the Nike brand and how he was able to significantly move beyond 10x in that brand. I could recall at one time the managers of the brand, they had an annual financial projection of about 3 million US dollars. And what Michael Jordan did by simply endorsing that brand, he took it to a whole nother level. So I'll give you some information as we go deeper into the program today. But these are three important questions that I want you to ask yourself is to define what is a brand. We will examine that later on. I want you to define, give me your definition of a value proposition. And I want you to also define what is your value, define a brand without a value proposition. All right, so some of the other things that we will look at is, of course, how to build out your brand to achieve large life impact. We look at your corporate culture and domestic and foreign threat, how to defend yourself against it, and also corporate culture and the business conversion factors. And this is a lot of information. So today is us to whet your appetite and give you some ideas in terms of what branding and marketing is all about and steps that you can possibly take to start to 10x your brand. Now let's move to the next slide and let's begin to unlock the questionnaire. The first question is define what is a brand. And the answer that we're given here is that a brand represents a company. It represents the company products and services. It represents the company ideology, and it represents ideology and culture and representatives. And representatives can be broad. The people who are in the field doing the marketing and branding, it could represent your distribution outlets. It could represent the affiliate marketing person. So this could be very, very broad. But it's important to understand these basic things. What is a brand? So we are very clear here. It's a company. It's the company products and services. It's the company ideology and culture, and is the company's representatives. Now let's look at the second question that we would have asked, definition of a value proposition. Now, what did you come up with? Now, in our definition, we are saying the definition of the value proposition is a contract, is an agreement. It's a promise between two or more persons. Now, in the 10X branding and marketing bootcamp, we clearly established, and these are things that we will go much deeper into over a period of time. We clearly established that your brand, your value proposition must be able to have impact at four different levels. Now, let me say this. Your value proposition must be able to have impact at the internal workforce. So your value proposition is not just a value proposition that is targeting the specific target market. It's also targeting the internal workforce. It's a promise to add value to fix problems. It's a promise to create an environment that is conducive to work. It's an environment that nurtures human resource development, and you provide care and compassion. All of this is a part of your value proposition. It's an agreement, it's a contract, it's a promise that you're making not to exploit your workforce. It's a promise that you're making to ensure that your workforce is happy and highly motivated, they're adequately compensated. All of this represents your value proposition. So your value proposition must be designed to have larger than life impact on the internal workforce. Your value proposition must be built out to have larger than life impact on the specific target market, because it is from the specific target market that you're able to increase sales. From increased sales, you have increased profit. You can better grow and scale your operation. So you want to make larger than life impact here. But along with this, you also want to make impact at a third level, and that is impact at the general public. And the average person might want to say, why do you want to impact the general public? Well, you want to impact the general public because they too have an opinion of you, and they may be able to refer customers to you, and they might become the largest, referrer to your products. There are many persons that have never, used the brand, but because of the brand awareness, they are able to refer persons to that brand largely because they have a, knowledge about the brand. But I want to also add something else. This is very important. The value proposition is also a promise that you're making to yourself. And what exactly am I saying here? It's a promise that you're making to your business, because you get into business not simply because you want to add value and fix problems for the general public, but you want to increase your disposable income. You want to grow and scale and diversify your business. And at the end of the day, you want to know that you have, a significant amount of financing to do the things that you want to do. So that is also a promise that you're making to yourself. So the value proposition must be able to capture all of these things. All right, absolutely necessary. The value proposition is not just an abstract terminology. Now, in most cases, to most people, especially young and novice who are in the field, you put out a value proposition, but the value proposition is as abstract. No, the value proposition is a promise. The value proposition is about your brand intention value trait, and your brand intention value trait is largely about you clearly identifying the value that you want to add to people, and the value must be built out into a step-by-step approach to achieve the value transfer. Absolutely necessary. And of course, I'll talk a little bit about the Nike brands as now, so give you some practical example as to what 10X branding is all about. Now, the next concept I want to look at, I did ask you to ask yourself this question, to think about it, and that is, what is a brand without a value proposition? What is a brand without the value proposition? Now, there's a couple of things that I I want to say the value proposition is, I already said this is a contract, all right, between two or more persons. It is a contract. But the serious question that I want you to really, really think about is that if your brand doesn't have a value proposition, what exactly is it saying? What exactly is that brand saying? Now, the brand, and I want to say this, the brand is a product of the value proposition or the brand intention value thread. The brand is a product of the value proposition or the brand intention value thread. Now, when you divorce the brand, the value proposition or the brand intention value thread from the brand itself, what happens? All right. What happens? Now, let me give you a practical example here. You have Nike and you have Michael Jordan. Now, which is the brand here? Michael Jordan definitely is the brand. Why Michael Jordan is the brand? Because Michael Jordan, through his high level of performance, his iconic performance, he has been able to build public confidence, public trust, public credibility. So the public has tremendous confidence and trust and credibility in him. So when Michael Jordan endorsed a brand, he transferred confidence and trust and credibility to that brand in itself. You remove Michael Jordan from Nike, and Nike becomes a land without a promise. So it is not the promised land any longer. But when Michael Jordan endorsed that brand, it becomes the promised land. The promised land where you get optimum quality, you get satisfaction, you get prestige when you wear the boots Nike. But when you take away Michael Jordan from the Nike, what happens? You perhaps get a product made in China a couple of years ago. China is doing much better now. But I have seen American companies go to war for infringement, copyright infringement, and patent infringement. And largely because someone can take a prestigious brand, someone can leverage that prestigious brand, cash flow it, and in a kind of a way they will significantly undermine your sales. So coming back to it, when you take away Michael Jordan from Nike, Nike doesn't exist the way it's supposed to be existing with Michael Jordan endorsement. Now, let me talk a little bit about some of the financial. It was, I believe it was a year when Michael Jordan signed on to this brand. I think it was since 1984. In that period, the owner of Nike had a financial projection of about annual financial projection of about 3 million USD. But upon signing the agreement, upon Michael Jordan endorsing that brand, he bring his value proposition over to that brand. In the same year, that company were able to generate $126 million. That is more than 30x in the annual financial projection that they had. So this is very, very clear here to you that celebrity endorsement is perhaps one of the fastest ways in which you can 10x your brand. But remember, I've said this several times before, a celebrity like the Michael Jordan, like the other celebrities in that field, like LeBron and those guys, they will not endorse a brand unless that brand would have already established some degree of confidence and trust and credibility in the eyes of the public. So when they come in, it's to take it to another level, or they will not endorse the brand unless they trust the brand. So once you can bring your brand to that point where it has a fair degree of trust by these celebrities and you can get them to endorse it, it can move tremendously forward. Now, Nike paid Michael Jordan last year, 2020, a sum total of $130 million to endorse the Nike brand. And that is the kind of payment that he has been getting over many, many years. So long as he has that contract with them, he will continue to be paid that kind of money. So that tells a whole story. The average person in the United States of America perhaps take away between $30,000 to $60,000 in paycheck annually. Annually, the average person. Now here is where you have a celebrity endorsing this brand, and they're able to walk away with $130 million in one signing. All right, one signing. So this speaks a lot about the Michael Jordan brand. He just didn't get there. Tremendous amount of work would have had to be done on Michael Jordan to help him to become that value, that iconic value proposition. So when he endorses something, it flies. We have seen similar things like this happen with uh, with the opera show. The moment you sit on opera show, and you might be an author, you might be, a doctor. From the time you sit on her show, and she start to, work in your favor, your clientele base significantly grows. You go way beyond 10x. I've seen this with Dr. Phil, and I've seen this with many, many, many authors. So this speaks a lot to celebrity branding. But again, Oprah is the kind of person who worked very hard at her field, tremendously hard at her field to be able to build up her value proposition, where from the time she said go, you know, say something significant happened. It's like when she touched something, it becomes gold, it becomes successful instantly. So celebrity endorsement is one way in which you can 10x your brand. Now, I want to come back to this question. So when we take away the value proposition from the brand, what you end up with. Now, if you recall all that I have been saying, as we look at the first one, the definition of a brand, we say a definition of a brand represents a company, company products and services, company ideology, culture, and the company representatives. But while this is so, there's something else that is important for you to understand as when it comes to branding. It is from your value proposition that you're able to identify whether your brand is a premium brand, whether your brand is a complementary brand, or whether your brand is a supplementary brand. The value proposition, the corporate ideology, the corporate culture literally influences the type of brand that you're going to be representing. Now, when you take away the value proposition, which should be an encapsulation of the corporate ideology and the corporate culture, what happens? Because you take it away, you no longer has Michael Jordan has the value proposition. You just have Nike. So nobody understands what's the value proposition that Nike in itself bringing divorce from uh, Michael Jordan. So you have the land with no promise. You have a booth with no promise. You may have a fake, brand there. So you don't trust that brand. What happens when you take away the value proposition from the brand itself? Now, several things happen here. You see this in what we call in the Caribbean, we call it cake shops or we call it bottom house. Now, You see many of these operations across the board, you know, and these are places like, for instance, there's some food outlets, but then you go to biting at those food outlets, but can you trust it? I've heard story that you go places to buy food and you get food poisoning. Why? Because they take away the value proposition from the brand. And what happens when you take away the value proposition from the brand? You end up with cake shop and bottom house. All right. And you end up, in this case, you may end up in the hospital, or you have to go pay some hospital bills. So this is what happens when you take away the value proposition from the brand. So it's important for you to understand that as you're setting yourself up to build a brand, before you can 10x that brand, it's important for you to ask yourself, what is your value proposition? What is your brand intention value trait? And remember, your value proposition, your brand intention value trait must be able to represent the important 7 tenets of branding and marketing. And some of them that we have already started to look at is what we call the brand intention value trait, the brand expectation value traits. Two important things for you to understand. Now, what we have clearly said is that the brand intention value trait is to add value and to fix problems. But where are you adding value and where are you fixing problems? You're adding value to the internal workforce. You're adding value, fixing problems to the specific target market. And certainly, you want to communicate your brand value, your brand intention to the general public so as to encourage customer feedback. Now, when we talk of the brand expectation value traits, what exactly are we talking about? Your brand has expectation not only to deliver value, but the expectation is to grow, is to expand, is to diversify, is to cash flow maximize. So the value proposition must encapsulate all of this. I'm just giving you a brief introduction to what the 10x branding is all about. And when you take away the value proposition is so much more. And just let me give you another example. Let us just suppose that you want to make larger than life impact on your internal workforce. It's not enough to say, I want to make larger than life impact on my internal workforce. What is your game plan to achieve larger than life impact on the internal workforce? What is the game plan to achieve that? Now, let's take, for example, a game plan can be that you want to work with your staff to ensure that they have what is known as their personal paycheck protection program. So this is getting practical in the case of a pandemic, like the novel coronavirus. You already have a social safety net for them. Is this going to achieve larger than life impact on the workforce? Of course, it's going to be way, way more better than you dropping the mic on them and on you throwing them under the bus, like how many of them are feeling and they're complaining about it. So your value proposition, which represents your corporate ideology and your corporate culture, can take into consideration all of these scenarios. Another thing that you perhaps can look at is your corporate paycheck protection program. All right. I'm just giving some ideas here. Your corporate paycheck protection program. The beauty about all of this is that when you're working with the right PFA, professional financial advisor, or personal financial advisor, they can help you to build out these systems, and it does not have to cost your company anything at all. But guess what? It is able to shape in the minds of your internal workforce and the public that you have a corporate culture that is sensitive to the needs, wants, and expectation of your workforce. And this in itself can have tremendous impact on how the public see your brand. This is all a part of branding and marketing. It can significantly influence how the public see your brand. They see your brand now as a humane institution that cares about your workforce. And guess what? The word starts to get around, and everybody wants to do business with you. Everybody wants to come and work for you because you're thinking ahead of these situations and you're incorporating these solutions into your corporate ideology, into your corporate culture. It becomes a value proposition, a promise that you're making to your workforce, your internal workforce, and beyond the promise, you're building systems and you're committing to that process. All right, let's go one step further in how you can build out your value proposition. Your value proposition can also be built out to speak to higher learning for your internal workforce. You can create those systems. So it is not just a promise made in isolation. There's a promise, and each one of the traits of that promise, which we call the brand traits optimization, must be clear. So trait one can be personal paycheck protection program. We have this in place. Trait two is corporate paycheck protection. We have this in place. Trait three can be investment in higher education for all of my employees. Trait four, we can look at early retirement. Early retirement doesn't mean that they're going to be leaving the organization early, but you have a game plan for them to ensure that when they would have retired, they have a social safety net that they can now look at an all-inclusive family tour and all of these different things. I'm just saying, who wants to work for a company that is able to build out all of this in their value proposition, that is able to build out all of this in the corporate ideology and the corporate culture? All right, going one step further, your value proposition must be able to have impact on the specific target market. And this means that when the target market is not looking, the promise that you made to them, you want to be able to deliver above and beyond their expectations. All right. Yeah, and you need to be able to skillfully, strategically communicate to them that when they're not looking, you care about them. This is how you are able to establish confidence, trust, and credibility in the eyes of the specific target market. But when you say that you want to add value and fix problem to the specific target market, is this just being said in isolation and in abstract? Or do you have a clear interpretation of appropriate systems to be adopted to achieve the larger life impact on the specific target market? So we talk about this. In order for you to achieve this larger life impact on the specific target market in aligning your value proposition to their needs, wants, and expectation, you need to take the time to understand what are their needs, what are their dreams and their hopes and their aspirations. All right. Many persons out there might want to know how to enhance their financial intelligence. They may want to ensure that they are not working paycheck to paycheck for the rest of their lives. So you might be an institution providing this content to people. It means now that you are not only talking about knowledge transfer in the theory, but you're now talking about knowledge transfer in the practical sense, where you can transfer the body of knowledge in the theory, but then you can move from the theory and go into the practical examples as to step-by-step approaches that the public can take, the specific target market can take to enhance their disposable income and gradually move away from their primary source of income and depending on a single source of income, living paycheck to paycheck. Are there practical approaches that you can use in your value proposition with your corporate ideology, your corporate culture to really get people off this branding and marketing? All right, and we're talking about how to build out your value proposition to achieve the larger than life impact. Now let's go a little deeper into this here. Your value proposition must have impact on the specific target market. What are those needs and wants, dreams and hopes and aspirations of the target market? Let us suppose that you did the research. You're now able to identify what are those needs. They want to increase their disposable income. So your promise is to help the public, the specific target market, to increase their disposable income. So that's a promise. But you want to now clearly identify the method of approach that you're going to be using to achieve that promise. It's not enough to make the promise. It's equally important to clearly establish a step-by-step approach that you're going to be using to help your specific target market to achieve that promise of achieving an increased disposable income. So for example, you can say, okay, we will teach you the theory of financial intelligence, and we will teach you programs like how to invest in the Vanguard index, how to invest in the S&P 500, and how to invest in the ETF. Now, let me just quickly explain what this is to you to really help you to understand the method that you're going to be using to help the specific target market to achieve the financial objective. Now, when we talk of an S&P 500, we're talking about the top 500 companies that you may have in a particular portfolio. And the top 500 companies, you are invested in them. And the reason I'm going to use the S&P 500, because the S&P 500 literally brings down the risk of an investment. Because when people are coming to you and they have dreams and hopes and aspirations of increasing their disposable income, they want to increase their disposable income divorced from the risk. So the last thing that you should tell them is about Forex investment, because it's the fastest financial market that you have, but then it has a lot of risk. So you bring them to a safer portfolio like the S&P 500, where they get a spread, and the spread over 500 companies significantly brings down the risk, because you will hardly likely will find 500 companies failing at the same time. Perhaps if 10 companies go under, you still have 499 companies that they can get dividend yields from. So they are still much closer to achieving the financial objectives. So that's just an example. So you have to be able to clearly establish that this is how you're going to help them to achieve the financial objectives. And this is the methodology that you're going to be using. This is the risk. This is the risk mitigation factors that you will be using to ensure that at the end of the day, they can cash out on their financial objectives. The next one that I talk about is ETF. Now, what is an ETF? An ETF is an exchange trade fund. Now, many of you might have heard about stock pickers. Now, what the stock pickers does, they look at that S&P 500 and they say, okay, I don't want to spread across 500. I want a spread of 100. So I'm going to identify the top 100 companies within the S&P 500 or any other portfolio, might be a hedge fund, but you look at the top 100 performing companies and you bundle them into an ETF and you make the investment there. So what it does, it eliminates some of the weaker companies and you identify the strongest 100 companies and you place your investment there. Now, to do this, to build up the confidence and trust and credibility in your recommendation, is not going to be the easiest task, because to do these kinds of analytics, it means that you have to be able to go to the back end of the companies to basically understand the team dynamics behind those companies, understand the team leadership capabilities, track records of the companies, and a whole host of different analytics you will have to do to come to that point to identify the top 100 performers. All right, performers meaning highest income earners. But once you can do this and clearly communicate this information to your specific target audience, you're likely to make that large to life impact. And of course, you as a company that might be dealing with asset management, this is what you want to be doing. You want to get the information and clearly communicate that information to the specific target market. Why? Because you want to achieve larger than life impact with this specific target market. So in building out the brand in itself, the value proposition in itself must have impact at the specific target market. But to achieve the impact, it means that you have to have the knowledge of what you're doing. It's not just the promise, it's the entire game plan behind that promise. So it's about the goal setting. You have the promise, now you set the goal. The goal tell you exactly what you want to achieve. You have the game plan. The game plan tell you what steps you're going to be taking to achieve that vision. From the game plan, you look at management and control systems. You look at system optimization processes, and you also look at systemization. So this is how deep we're going to be going into this program with you. So at the end of the day, you have a clear working knowledge as to how to make that large to life impact with your value proposition to 10x the brand. All right. So it's absolutely necessary information for you to have. I know I have been rambling on a lot here, but I trust that that little bit of information you get there really help you to understand the value proposition and how to value proposition. It's not just a promise, but it's everything else around that promise to bring it to light, to life. All right. You don't want to make a promise in isolation, and you don't want your promise to be abstract. So if you say that your promise is to increase people's financial intelligence and put them in a position of strength to be able to apply the body of knowledge so they can get 10x financial results, that's a value proposition that you're making. And you must have a clear game plan as to how you can actualize that value proposition. And it's by clearly understanding how to actualize it and developing your game plan to actualize it and pulling public support around this is what can really help you to be able to 10x. Now, this example is relevant to every single area of business. I have only looked at financial intelligence in terms of making large and life impact on the specific target market, but it's relevant to every area of business. This concept can be applied to every area. Now, I'm going to stop here for now, and I want us to go and come back to some of the questions that I would have asked earlier. What happens when you take away the value proposition from the brand? It means that you don't have no corporate culture and no corporate ideology, no corporate, no control and management processes. You have no processes and optimization game plan, which is what I talked about just now. You have no systems and systemization processes. And that's what brings you right back to what we call a cake shop and a bottom house operation. And our vision at Global Branding, Global Capital Inc., when we're helping you to build out your brand to have a larger than life impact, is to get you quickly past here, if you are here. If you're beyond this, is to really bring you to that point where you can build that brand to start to perhaps get celebrity endorsement, like the Jordan case that we talk about. Before Michael Jordan endorsed the Nike brand was doing a little reasonable, but to date, it is being touted that Michael Jordan endorsement perhaps is the best thing that ever happened to the Nike brand and to the company that is responsible for so many other brands. All right. So it speaks a lot about really understanding your value proposition. So what I want you to clearly understand here, you may have a company, you may have products, you may have services, but if the company, the products and the services is not built out into a corporate culture, into a corporate ideology that represents your value proposition, that company, that products, that service can collapse. So it's important for you to take the time to understand what is the value proposition. And there are seven important concepts for you to understand about value propositioning. All right. You must understand the brand intention value threats. You must understand the brand expectation value threats. And there are five additional important concepts for you to understand. And you must take the right step to master all of this. All right, so I'm going to stop here. And today, I trust that you find today's information useful. I just want to quickly recap. Um, we begin this program by looking at what is the, we look at a definition of a brand, we look at definition of the value proposition, and we look at the definition of a brand without the value proposition. And of course, we emphasize the importance of knowing the value proposition and investing in your value proposition, committing to that value proposition. And it's not just a promise that you're making to the internal workforce. It's not just a promise that you're making to the specific target market. It's not just a promise that you're making to the public. And just to add a little bit more to the public, ExxonMobil's responsibility is not just to bring gas to shore, is not just to just deposit money to the government, but ExxonMobil has an environmental obligation, and that environmental obligation can affect each and every one of us as Guyanese citizens. If the waters are polluted, the water can seriously affect marine lives. And if we have too much flaring, there have been a lot of talks about the environmental hazard of all of that. So ExxonMobil has a responsibility to the general public in this case. Just an example of when you're building out your value proposition, how to look at your value proposition. Again, your value proposition, it also has a promise to yourself as the company owners because you want to grow, you want to scale, you want to diversify your brand, your business, and you want to significantly cash flow maximize. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. All right, so I'm going to pull the curtain down on today's program. I trust you would have enjoyed this brief introduction to branding and marketing. It's a very deep program. I want to say it comes to you with the kind compliments of Global Capital Inc. And our mission at Global Capital Inc. is to position our clients, employees, and strategic partners to understand, create, and leverage passive income cash flow in order to build out generational and intergenerational wealth. In our program, you will learn about financial intelligence in the commercial financial sector, financial intelligence in the investment financial sector, financial intelligence in smart capital market, and financial intelligence for sustainable livelihood. It's important for you to recognize that financial intelligence goes beyond your ability to make money and maximize your disposable income. It addresses the issue of understanding the global financial system and leveraging this intelligence to create good debt cash flow, minimize existing debt financial portfolio while maximizing financial and equity capital gain. The understanding of the commercial financial sector, the investment financial sector, and smart capital market is an important body of knowledge for you to have in the global landscape of financial intelligence. My name is Gary Thompson. I'm a business development consultant by profession. I'm a humanitarian by nature. And I'm the multiple best-selling author for several books, including Billionaire Codes and Manager's Toolkit. My new book, 10x Branding and Marketing, the Psychology of Doing Business, will be out very soon. And I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast so we can reach as much people as possible. Remember, it's COVID-19, so protect yourself, protect your loved ones, protect those closest to you. And see you in another broadcast.